Clara Morgan's fingers were slipping. Blood, warm and thick, ran down her arm as she clutched her daughter's small hand.
"Mama, please wake up,"
Rose whispered. But Clara couldn't answer. Her legs had stopped working 3 miles back. The only thing keeping her moving was the tiny voice begging her not to die. Somewhere behind them, men were hunting. Ahead, a single light flickered in the darkness. This is a story about the doors we open and the lives we save by letting strangers in. Stay with me until the end. Subscribe and comment below what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story of survival and second chances can travel. The knock came just after sunset. Caleb Thornton had been staring at the same spot on the wall for the better part of an hour. The whiskey in his glass had gone warm. The fire had burned down to embers. Outside, the Texas wind howled like something wounded, but Caleb barely heard it. He'd stopped hearing most things 5 years ago, right around the time he'd stopped caring whether he lived or died. The knock came again, small, hesitant, like a bird tapping at a window. Caleb's hand moved to the revolver at his hip before he even realized he'd moved. Visitors didn't come to the Thornton Ranch, not anymore. The folks in Cedar Ridge had learned to leave him alone, and he'd learned to prefer it that way.
"Please,"
A child's voice, thin as paper.
"Please, is anybody home? Mama's hurt real bad."
Caleb was at the door before he'd made any conscious decision to move. His body remembered how to respond to need, even when his heart had forgotten how to care. He pulled the door open, and the evening light revealed a sight that stopped his breath cold. A little girl stood on his porch, 7 years old, maybe 8, blonde hair matted with something dark, a blue calico dress torn at the sleeve and stained across the bodice in a way that made Caleb's stomach turn. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, but her eyes, God help him, her eyes were steady. Too steady for a child who'd seen whatever had put that blood on her dress.
"My papa died today,"
she said, and the words came out flat, rehearsed, like she'd been practicing them during however long she'd been walking.
"Bad men shot him. Can we please sleep in your barn tonight? Mama's hurt. She can't walk no more."
Caleb's gaze dropped past the child to the porch railing, and his heart damn near stopped. A woman lay crumpled against the wooden post, barely visible in the fading light. Even from where he stood, Caleb could see she was in terrible shape. Dress torn, face swollen, one arm bent wrong. Blood, dark and thick, pooled beneath her on the weathered boards. "Jesus Christ," Caleb breathed. He was moving before he could think, kneeling beside her, his hands hovering with practiced caution. He'd doctored wounded men during the war. He knew what trauma looked like. This woman had seen more than her share. Her breathing came shallow, labored. Each exhale, a small whimper that cut through him like a blade.
"Mama fell down a lot,"
the little girl said behind him, and something in her voice, the careful way she said it, told Caleb this child was protecting her mother even now, wrapping horror in innocent words. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Caleb kept his voice gentle, even as his mind catalogued injuries. Cracked ribs at minimum, dislocated shoulder, cuts on her arms, defensive wounds from fighting back.
Rose Morgan. That's my mama, Clara."
"Well, Rose Morgan, your mama ain't sleeping in no barn tonight." Caleb stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Neither are you. Can you get that door open wide for me? I'm going to carry her inside." Rose nodded quickly, her small hands pushing until the door swung fully open. Caleb slid his arms beneath Clara Morgan with care he hadn't felt in years, lifting her like she was made of something precious. She weighed almost nothing. Up close, he could see she'd been starved as well as beaten. Her clothes hung loose on a frame that might have been slender to begin with, but was now skeletal. As he carried her across the threshold, Clara's eyes fluttered open. Green eyes, he noticed, the color of new spring grass. They fixed on his face with confusion and raw terror.
"No," she gasped. "Please, no more. Please."
"You're safe," Caleb said quickly. "I ain't gonna hurt you. I'm just getting you to a bed. You hear me? You're safe now." But her eyes had already rolled back, consciousness leaving her again. Caleb felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. Not at her, at whoever had done this. He'd seen his share of violence during the war, had committed his own share too, but this kind of brutality toward a woman and child ignited something in him he'd thought long dead. He laid her on the bed in the back room, the bed he'd shared with Elizabeth, the bed where she'd died, bringing their son into the world, the bed he hadn't been able to sleep in since. It was the cleanest, softest place in the house, and Clara Morgan needed it more than his ghosts did. "Rose," he said, turning to the child who'd followed him silently, her small fists clenched at her sides. "I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that?"
"I've been brave for 3 days now, mister. I reckon I can keep going."
Something cracked in Caleb's chest. 3 days. This child had kept herself and her dying mother alive for 3 days. "I need water from the pump outside. Fill that basin there," he pointed. "Can you manage that?" She nodded and scurried out, grateful for something useful to do. Alone with Clara, Caleb began the grim work of assessment. He'd need to tend her wounds, but he hesitated. She'd been violated enough. He could see it in the bruising on her thighs, in the way her dress had been torn, in 100 small signs that told a story he wished he didn't know how to read. He'd seen what men could do during the war, had arrived too late more than once. The fury that rose in him now was personal, visceral. Rose returned with the water, and Caleb set her to finding clean cloths while he dampened a rag and began gently cleaning the blood from Clara's face. Up close, beneath the bruising and swelling, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought. Maybe 28. Features that might have been pretty once, before pain had carved itself into every line.
"Is Mama gonna die?"
Caleb turned to find Rose standing in the doorway, clutching a bundle of cloths. Her voice was so small, so terrified, that something broke open in his chest. He looked at this brave, traumatized child, who'd somehow kept them both alive long enough to find help, and he made her a promise he had no right to make. "Not if I can help it," he said. "But I need to look after her wounds, and that means you need to wait in the other room for a spell. Can you do that for me?" Rose's chin trembled, but she nodded.
"Will you call me when she wakes up?"
"The second she opens her eyes, I promise." After Rose had retreated, Caleb worked carefully, methodically. He'd doctored enough wounded soldiers to know what needed doing. He reset Clara's dislocated shoulder with a quick, practiced motion that made her cry out even in unconsciousness. He wrapped her cracked ribs with strips torn from an old sheet. He cleaned her cuts with whiskey, watching her face for signs of pain. When he finished, he dressed her carefully in one of Elizabeth's old nightgowns, his movements clinical, respectful. He covered her with quilts and stood looking down at her. She looked impossibly fragile against the white pillows. Her dark hair spread like spilled ink. But she was breathing steadier now, and color was returning to her cheeks. Caleb found Rose curled in his reading chair, hugging her knees to her chest. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, as though she'd cried herself out long before reaching his door. "Your mama's resting," he said gently. "She's hurt bad, but I think she's going to make it."
"Can I see her?"
"In a bit. First, I need to know something." Caleb knelt so he was at her level. "When's the last time you ate?" Rose's face went blank. that careful, practiced blankness that no child should know how to wear.
I don't remember, she said.
Then let's fix that. He led her to the kitchen and set about cooking. Eggs from his chickens, bacon he'd smoked himself, bread that was 3 days old but still good enough. Rose watched from the doorway, tracking his every movement.
You know how to cook?
She asked, surprised.
I know how not to starve, Caleb replied, cracking eggs into the cast iron. Learned it the hard way, after my wife passed.
Your wife died too? The question, so matter-of-fact, hurt to hear from a child's mouth. She did. 5 years ago now.
Were you real sad?
Caleb paused, spatula in hand. No one had asked him that in 5 years. Everyone just assumed, or avoided the topic entirely. I was, he said quietly. Still am, some days. But mostly I'm just here.
That's how I feel about Papa.
Rose climbed onto a chair at the table.
Like I should be sadder. But I'm too tired to be anything right now.
Caleb turned to look at her properly then. This little girl with old eyes and a soldier's weariness. You loved your papa?
Yes, sir. He was good to us. He sang songs and told stories, and he never hit Mama, not even once. Even when she burnt the biscuits real bad.
Rose paused.
The bad men shot him. He told us to run, and we did. But I heard the guns.
Her voice dropped to a whisper.
And then later, when it got dark, the bad men found us anyway. They hurt Mama real bad. I tried to make them stop, but I'm too little.
Caleb's grip tightened on the spatula handle. How many men?
I don't know exactly. Maybe 5? It was hard to see. They had bandanas on their faces.
Rose pulled at a thread on her dress.
Mama screamed a lot. I hid under the wagon like she told me to.
Rose. Caleb waited until her eyes met his. Look at me. She did. You got your mama here. You walked how far? 3 days?
3 days. Maybe more. We slept in the cave one night, and under a tree another. Mama kept falling down, so we had to go slow. Sometimes I had to drag her.
You kept your mama alive for 3 days and got her to safety. Caleb's voice was rough. That ain't being too little. That's about the bravest thing I ever heard of. Tears welled in Rose's eyes then, the first real emotion breaking through her careful composure.
I was so scared, she whispered. I thought she was going to die like Papa, and then I'd be all alone.
Caleb set down the spatula and knelt in front of her, his joints protesting. You ain't alone now, you hear me? Long as you're under my roof, you ain't alone. Rose threw her arms around his neck, and Caleb found himself holding this small, trembling child while she finally let herself cry. He'd forgotten what it felt like to be needed, to have someone depend on him for comfort. It was terrifying and heartbreaking and strangely healing all at once. They stayed like that until the eggs started to burn. Caleb stood quickly, lifting her with him and setting her in a chair. He scraped the eggs onto a plate, overdone but edible, added bacon and bread with butter, and set it in front of her. Rose ate like she was starving, which she probably was. She paused only to gulp water from the cup he gave her, her eyes darting constantly toward the bedroom door. She'll still be there when you finish, Caleb assured her. I promise. After she'd eaten everything on her plate and half of what he'd put on his own, Caleb led her to the bedroom. Clara lay exactly as he'd left her, breathing deep and steady now. Rose climbed carefully onto the bed and curled against her mother's side, her small hand resting on Clara's arm.
Will you stay? She asked Caleb. In case she wakes up scared?
So Caleb dragged his reading chair into the bedroom and settled into it, watching over these two broken souls who'd stumbled into his life. Outside, the Texas night pressed close, full of stars and silence. Inside, for the first time in 5 years, his house felt less like a tomb and more like something he couldn't name yet. Clara Morgan woke to pain. Everything hurt. Her ribs screamed with every breath. Her shoulder throbbed. Her face felt swollen and tight. She tried to remember where she was, how she'd gotten here, but her memory was fragmented. Thomas's face, smiling at her over breakfast. The wagon rolling through unfamiliar territory. Gunfire. Thomas falling, running, hands grabbing her, tearing, hurting. Clara gasped and tried to sit up, but firm hands pressed her gently back. "Easy now," a man's voice said. "You're safe. You're hurt bad, but you're safe." Terror flooded through her. Her eyes flew open to find a stranger's face above her. Older than Thomas had been. Weathered features, gray threading through dark hair, brown eyes that held something steady and sad.
"Where's Rose?"
Her voice came out raw, broken.
"Right here, Mama."
And then Rose was there, her small face appearing beside the stranger's, tear-streaked but whole, alive.
"This is Mr. Caleb,"
Rose said.
"He helped us. He made me eggs and fixed your hurts, and says we don't have to sleep in the barn."
Clara's eyes filled with tears.
"You're okay. They didn't. You're okay?" "I'm okay, Mama. I promise."
The stranger, Caleb, stepped back, giving her space. "Your daughter walked you here over 3 days," he said. "She's something special, Mrs. Morgan."
"Just Clara."
She looked around the room, taking in the simple furniture, the clean sheets, the nightgown she was wearing. A woman's nightgown.
"Where are we?"
"My ranch, about 10 miles south of Cedar Ridge. You're in my bed. Didn't have anywhere else fit for you." He paused. "I doctored your wounds, nothing else. You're safe here." Clara wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But trust felt like a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. She'd trusted the world to be fair, and it had taken her husband. She'd trusted the night to hide them, and it had delivered them to monsters. How could she trust this stranger, no matter how kind his eyes seemed? As if sensing her thoughts, Caleb moved toward the door. "I'll give you and Rose some privacy. There's water on the nightstand. Don't try to move too much. You got cracked ribs, a shoulder that was dislocated, and more bruises than I could count."
"Mr. Caleb?"
He stopped.
"Why?"
Clara forced the word out. "Why would you help us?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because you knocked," he finally said, "and I was tired of keeping the door closed." After he left, Clara pulled Rose close and wept into her daughter's hair. They were alive. Against everything, despite those men and what they'd done, they were still alive. She didn't know yet that Caleb Thornton was a man haunted by his own ghosts, that he'd been dying by inches in this house for 5 years, that her arrival would be the beginning of something neither of them expected. All she knew was that Rose was safe and warm and alive. For now, that had to be enough. The next 3 days passed in a fever haze for Clara. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes waking to find Caleb spooning broth into her mouth, other times waking to Rose's hand clasped in hers. In her delirium, she relived the attack, Thomas falling, the men laughing, the pain, endless and terrible. Each time she woke screaming, it was Caleb's calm voice that brought her back. "You're safe, Clara. You're here with me and Rose. Nobody's going to hurt you. Not while I'm breathing." On the 4th day, her fever broke. Clara woke with a clear head for the first time since the attack. Sunlight streamed through a window, and from somewhere outside, she could hear Rose laughing, actually laughing, and a man's deeper voice answering. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her ribs. But she was awake, truly awake, and desperate to see her daughter. "Rose?" she called, her voice stronger than before. The door opened. Caleb appeared, wiping his hands on a dishcloth. "You're awake. Good. How you feeling?" "Like I got trampled by horses. Where's Rose?" "Outside feeding the chickens. She's been asking about you every 5 minutes. I'll fetch her."
Wait. Clara struggled to sit up against the pillows. "Mr. Thornton."
"Caleb. Caleb, I need to know something." She met his eyes. "How long can we stay?" He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Long as you need." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I got." He paused. "Look, I ain't asking for anything. You need a place to heal? I got one. Your daughter needs somewhere safe? This is it. When you're strong enough to decide what comes next, you can decide. Until then, you rest." "Why?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "I don't understand why you're doing this. Men don't just—" "I ain't those men." The words were quiet, but they hit like thunder. "I know what they did to you," Caleb continued. "I saw the evidence when I doctored you. And I know you got no reason to trust any man right now. But I'm telling you true, Clara. Long as you're under my roof, no one's gonna hurt you. Not those men, not anyone." Clara stared at him, searching for any hint of deception, any sign of ulterior motive. She found only weariness and determination, and that deep, persistent sadness. "I don't know how to thank you," she finally said. "Don't need thanks. Need you to rest and heal, so you can be strong for that little girl of yours." He straightened. "I'll get Rose." Rose came bursting through the door moments later, face alight with joy. "Mama, you're really awake!" She climbed carefully onto the bed, mindful of Clara's injuries. "Mr. Caleb said you would wake up, but I was scared you'd sleep forever like in the fairy tales." "I'm awake, baby." Clara wrapped her good arm around her daughter. "Tell me everything. What have you been doing?" And Rose did, words tumbling out in an excited rush. She told Clara about the chickens and how Mr. Caleb taught her to collect eggs without scaring them. About the barn with the horses, 2 of them, both beautiful. About helping make biscuits, even though hers came out lumpy. "And Mama, he carved me a doll, see?" Rose held up a simple wooden figure, carefully shaped and sanded smooth. "He said every little girl needs a doll, and since we left mine in the wagon, he made me a new one. I named her Hope." Clara's throat tightened. "That's a beautiful name, sweetheart." "I thought maybe she could be friends with the old doll's spirit. You know, in heaven, with Papa." Clara pulled Rose close, breathing in the smell of her hair. Her daughter, who'd seen horrors no child should witness, was still capable of naming a doll Hope. Maybe, Clara thought, maybe that was enough to keep going for. That evening, after Rose had fallen asleep clutching her new doll, Caleb brought Clara broth and bread. She ate carefully, watching him move around the room with quiet efficiency. "Thank you," she said, "for the doll. Rose hasn't stopped talking about it." "Carving keeps my hands busy." Caleb settled into the chair by the bed. "Keeps my mind from wandering places it shouldn't go." Clara studied him in the lamplight. The lines around his eyes, the gray in his stubble, the way he held himself like a man carrying a weight he'd never set down. "You lost someone," she said. It wasn't a question. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "My wife, Elizabeth. Our son, too, though he never drew breath. 5 years ago, come winter." "I'm sorry." "So am I." He looked at his hands. "She died in that bed you're lying in. Tried to bring our boy into the world, but something went wrong. I couldn't save either of them." Clara's heart clenched. She was lying in a dead woman's bed, wearing a dead woman's nightgown, being cared for by a man who'd lost everything. "Why did you help us?" she asked again. The truth this time. Caleb raised his eyes to hers. "Because when I heard your daughter's voice asking if anyone was home, I thought maybe God was giving me a second chance.
A chance to save someone, since I couldn't save them." He stood abruptly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next." But at the door, he paused. "Clara?"
Yes?
"I meant what I said. Long as you're here, you're safe. Whatever happened before, whoever did those things to you, they ain't getting near you again. Not while I'm still breathing." After he'd gone, Clara lay staring at the ceiling. She was in a stranger's house, wearing a dead woman's clothes, hiding from men who'd killed her husband and done unspeakable things to her. But for the first time since that terrible night, she felt something other than fear. She didn't have a word for it yet, but it felt like the faintest possibility of hope. The days that followed took on a rhythm Clara hadn't expected. She woke each morning to the sound of Rose's laughter drifting through the window, mixing with the deeper rumble of Caleb's voice. She'd lie there for a moment, listening, letting herself believe they were safe. Then the memories would come flooding back, and she'd have to remind herself to breathe. By the end of the first week, Clara could walk from the bedroom to the main room without collapsing. Caleb had rigged a crutch from an old broom handle, and Rose hovered constantly, ready to catch her mother if she stumbled. "You're pushing too hard," Caleb said one morning, watching Clara struggle to the kitchen table. "Doc Webb from town said you need rest, not exercise." "You brought a doctor here?" "Rode out 3 days ago while you were sleeping. Wanted to make sure I hadn't missed anything." Caleb poured her coffee. "He said you're healing good, but you gotta take it slow." Clara wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "I can't just lie in bed while you do everything. I'm not helpless." "Nobody said you were." "Then let me help. Let me do something useful." Caleb studied her for a long moment.
"You know how to cook?" "I was a teacher back in Boston, but yes, I can cook."
"A teacher?"
Something shifted in his expression. Interest, maybe. "What'd you teach?" "Reading, writing, arithmetic. Children, mostly, ages 6 to 12.
"Rose is 7.
"I know." Clara managed a small smile.
She's smart. Picks things up quick. I was teaching her letters before we left Massachusetts."
"She told me. Said you were going to teach her to read whole books once you got to Oregon." The mention of their destination, the dream that had died with Thomas, made Clara's chest tighten.
"That was the plan," she said quietly.
Caleb was silent for a moment. Then he stood and retrieved something from a shelf above the fireplace. A small stack of books, worn but well cared for. "Elizabeth's," he said, setting them on the table. "She loved to read. Used to read to me at night, back when things were good." He pushed the books toward Clara. "Maybe you could teach Rose with these. Give you something to do while you're healing." Clara touched the spine of the top book. A collection of poems, the leather soft with age.
"You're sure?"
Elizabeth would have wanted them used, not just sitting there collecting dust. That afternoon, Clara sat in the reading chair with Rose on her lap and began teaching her daughter to read from a dead woman's books. Caleb worked nearby, mending a bridle, but Clara caught him watching sometimes. Not in a way that made her uncomfortable, more like a man seeing something he'd thought was gone from the world.
"The cat sat on the..."
Rose sounded out each word carefully.
"Good, baby. What's the last word?" "Mat," Rose beamed. "The cat sat on the mat." "Perfect. You're doing so well." "Mr. Caleb, did you hear? I read a whole sentence."
Caleb looked up from his work, and Clara saw something crack in his careful composure, a warmth he was trying to hide. "I heard," he said. "Pretty soon you'll be reading better than me."
"Can you read, Mr. Caleb?" "Some, enough to get by. Never had much schooling." Rose looked at Clara, then back at Caleb. "Maybe Mama could teach you too. She's a real good teacher." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks.
Rose, I'm sure Mr. Caleb doesn't.
"I wouldn't mind it." Caleb's voice was quiet. "If you're willing, I mean. Always wished I could read proper." Their eyes met across the room, and something passed between them that Clara couldn't name.
"I'd be happy to," she heard herself say.
So the lessons expanded. Rose in the mornings, working through simple words and sentences. Caleb in the evenings, after Rose had gone to bed, stumbling through more complex passages, while Clara guided him patiently. "This word here," Caleb said one night, pointing at the page. "I can't make sense of it." Clara leaned closer to look. "Redemption. What's it mean?" "It means being saved, being forgiven for things you've done wrong, getting a second chance."
Caleb was quiet for a long moment, staring at the word. "Redemption," he repeated slowly. "That's a good word."
"It is." He looked up at her then, and the rawness in his eyes made Clara's breath catch. "You think everyone can get that? Redemption?" Clara thought about Thomas, dying in the dirt, about the men who'd hurt her, about herself, sitting here in a stranger's house, trying to remember how to feel human again. "I think we have to believe they can," she said. "Otherwise, what's the point of going on?" Caleb nodded slowly and returned his attention to the book. But something had shifted between them, something neither of them was ready to acknowledge. 2 weeks after her arrival, Clara insisted on cooking dinner. "You don't have to prove anything," Caleb said, watching her move around his kitchen. "I'm not proving anything. I'm thanking you. There's a difference." "Already told you I don't need thanks." "And I already told you I'm not helpless."
Clara turned to face him, hands on her hips.
"Let me do this, Caleb, please. I need to feel like I'm contributing something."
He held up his hands in surrender. "All right. But if you get tired, you stop."
"Deal."
She made chicken and dumplings, a recipe her mother had taught her back in Boston. The familiar motions soothed something in her chest. Kneading dough, stirring broth. For a little while, she could pretend she was just a woman cooking dinner for her family, not a widow hiding from murderers. Rose helped by setting the table, chattering about her day. She'd named all the chickens now: Bessie, Mabel, Dorothy, and Queen Victoria. "Queen Victoria?" Caleb raised an eyebrow.
"She's the bossiest one. Mama said that's a good name for a bossy chicken."
Caleb's lips twitched. Can't argue with that logic. Dinner was the best meal any of them had eaten in weeks. Rose talked constantly, filling the silence that might have been awkward. Caleb ate steadily, complimenting Clara's cooking with quiet sincerity. "Haven't had a meal this good since—" He trailed off. "Since Elizabeth," Clara finished for him. "Yeah. Tell me about her." Caleb looked up, surprised. "You want to hear about my dead wife?"
"I do, if you're willing to talk about her."
Rose had fallen asleep at the table, her head pillowed on her arms. Caleb looked at the sleeping child, then back at Clara. "She was stubborn," he said finally. "Fierce. Laughed loud and didn't care who heard. Grew up on a farm and could outwork most men I knew." A faint smile touched his lips. "We met at a barn raising. She corrected my hammer technique in front of everyone. Told me I'd brain myself if I kept swinging like that."
"Were you embarrassed?"
"Mortified. But she was right." He shook his head. "I fell in love with her right there. Took me 6 months to convince her I was worth marrying."
How long were you together?
3 years. Best 3 years of my life. We built this house together. Planted that garden out back. Dreamed about filling the place with children. His voice roughened. She got pregnant, and we were so happy. But the baby came early, and everything went wrong. Clara reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. It was the first time she'd voluntarily touched him.
I'm sorry, Caleb.
I blamed myself for years. Still do sometimes. If I'd gotten the doctor faster, if I'd known what to do. He turned his hand over, letting his fingers intertwine with hers. But I've learned that grief don't care about if. It just is. You carry it because you have to.
Do you still love her?
Every day. I'll love her till I die. He met Clara's eyes. But loving someone who's gone don't mean your heart's closed forever. Elizabeth wouldn't have wanted that. She'd have kicked my backside and told me to live. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks.
Thomas was the same way.
He was so full of life, always making plans, always dreaming about what came next. She wiped her eyes with her free hand. He died protecting us. Those men wanted the wagon, our supplies. Thomas went for his gun, and they shot him. Just like that. 1 minute he was there, and then he wasn't. I'm sorry. The worst part is, I couldn't even bury him. We had to run. I don't even know where his body is now. Her voice broke. Rose keeps asking if Papa's in heaven, and I say yes, because what else can I tell her? But some nights, I wonder if his ghost is still out there on that road, waiting for me to come back. Caleb squeezed her hand. His spirit ain't stuck nowhere, Clara. A man who died protecting his family, a man like that goes straight to whatever comes next. He's at peace. I promise you that.
How can you know?
Because I've seen men die. Good men and bad ones. And the good ones, they got this look at the end. Like they can see something beautiful waiting for them. He paused. Thomas loved you. He's at peace knowing you and Rose are safe. Clara let out a shaky breath.
I want to believe that.
Then believe it. Sometimes faith ain't about knowing. It's about choosing to hope anyway. They sat in silence for a long moment, hands still joined, the sleeping child between them. Finally, Clara spoke.
I should put Rose to bed.
Let me. Caleb stood and gathered Rose in his arms with practiced ease. The child stirred, murmuring something unintelligible, then settled against his chest. Clara watched him carry her daughter to the small bedroom he'd fixed up, watched the gentleness in his hands, the care in his movements. When he returned, she was standing at the window, looking out at the darkness.
You're good with her, Clara said without turning. With Rose. She trusts you.
Kids are easy. They see what's in front of them, not all the complicated stuff adults see.
Is that why she's started calling you Uncle Caleb?
Caleb went still.
She has? In her sleep. She was talking last night, and she said, Uncle Caleb will keep us safe.
Clara turned to face him.
I hope that's all right. I can tell her to stop if it bothers you.
It don't bother me. His voice was rough. It's been a long time since anyone called me family.
5 years.
5 years. Clara crossed to where he stood, stopping close enough to touch, but not quite touching.
Caleb, I need to tell you something.
All right.
Those men who attacked us, the one in charge, his name is Silas Blackwood. I saw his face before they put on the bandanas. I'd know him anywhere.
She swallowed hard.
There was a wanted poster at the last town we passed through. $5,000 reward. He's killed dozens of people. Caleb's expression hardened. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've been lying here for 2 weeks letting you take care of us, and you deserve to know what you're protecting us from.
These men, they don't leave witnesses. We were supposed to die, Caleb. The only reason we didn't is because they got careless, and I managed to run while they were... She couldn't finish the sentence. I know what they did. Then you know they'll come looking for us. When they realize we survived, they'll hunt us down. They'll kill us, and anyone who gets in their way. Clara's voice shook. You should send us away. We've brought danger to your door, and you don't deserve... Stop. Caleb gripped her shoulders, his hands firm but gentle. Look at me. She did. I knew there was danger the moment I saw you bleeding on my porch. I made my choice then, and I'm making it again now. His eyes blazed. Silas Blackwood or anyone else wants to get to you and Rose, they go through me first. You understand?
Why?
Clara's voice cracked.
Why would you risk your life for strangers?
You ain't strangers. Not anymore.
But, Clara, he cut her off. I spent 5 years dying in this house, just waiting for God to finally take me, because I couldn't see the point of living without Elizabeth and the boy. Then you knocked on my door, and for the first time since I buried them, I felt something other than grief. What did you feel? Purpose. His grip on her shoulder softened. You and Rose gave me a reason to wake up, a reason to care whether I live or die. That ain't nothing. That's everything. Clara felt tears spilling down her cheeks again. I'm so broken, Caleb. What they did to me... You ain't broken. You're hurt. There's a difference. He released her shoulders and stepped back, giving her space. Broken means you can't be fixed. Hurt means you're healing. And you're healing, Clara. I can see it every day. Some days I don't feel like I'm healing. Some days I feel like I'm just surviving one moment to the next. That's still healing. Survival is the first step. The rest comes after. Clara wiped her eyes. How do you know so much about this? Because I've been where you are. After Elizabeth died, I didn't think I'd ever feel anything again. Thought the pain would eat me alive. But it didn't. Little by little, day by day, it got easier. It never went away completely, but it got easier to carry. Does it still hurt? Every day. But now it's a different kind of hurt. Not the sharp, can't-breathe kind. More like an old wound that aches when it rains. He paused. You'll get there too, I promise. Clara nodded slowly. Thank you for understanding, for not treating me like I'm made of glass. You ain't glass, you're iron. Battered some, but not broken. A small laugh escaped her. Iron. I like that better than broken. Good. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow we start figuring out what comes next. What do you mean? Caleb's expression shifted to something harder. If Blackwood's as dangerous as you say, we need to be ready. I won't let you and Rose just wait around for those men to find you. We're going to make a plan. What kind of plan? The kind that keeps you safe, whatever it takes. Clara should have been afraid. Should have been overwhelmed by the weight of what was coming. Instead, for the first time since Thomas died, she felt something like hope. The next morning, Caleb brought Clara a revolver. You know how to use one of these? Clara stared at the gun in his hands. Thomas taught me. I'm not a great shot, but I can hit what I'm aiming at. Good. I want you to carry this when I'm not around. He pressed it into her hands. And I want you to practice. Every day, when Rose is napping, we'll work on your aim. You think they're coming soon? I think they're already looking. Men like Blackwood, they don't like loose ends. Soon as they figure out you survived, they'll come.
His jaw tightened. But we're going to be ready. So they practiced. Every afternoon, while Rose slept, Caleb set up targets behind the barn and taught Clara to shoot with deadly accuracy. "Don't aim for the body," he said. "It's too big, too easy to miss vital spots. Aim for the center of the chest. Right here." He touched his sternum. "Hit them there, they go down."
I've never shot a person before.
And maybe you won't have to. But if it comes to it, you need to be ready. You're fighting for Rose's life. For your own. Don't hesitate. Clara squeezed the trigger. The bullet hit dead center. "Again," Caleb said. She fired until her arms ached and her ears rang, until the targets were nothing but shredded paper. "Good," Caleb said finally. "You're ready."
Ready to kill someone?
Ready to defend yourself. He took the gun and reloaded it. "There's no shame in fighting back, Clara. Those men who hurt you, they gave up their right to mercy when they laid hands on you. Whatever happens to them, they brought on themselves." Clara accepted the loaded gun, feeling its weight in her hands. "I used to believe in turning the other cheek," she said quietly, "in forgiveness and Christian charity. Now I'm not sure what I believe." "You believe in protecting Rose. That's enough. The rest can wait until she's safe." 3 weeks into her recovery, Clara had a nightmare that changed everything. She was back in the wagon. Thomas was falling. The men were laughing. Hands were grabbing her, tearing her dress, and she couldn't scream, couldn't fight, couldn't do anything but... "Clara! Clara, wake up!" Her eyes flew open. Caleb stood over her, his face creased with worry. Rose was crying in the doorway.
Mama was screaming,
Rose sobbed.
I tried to wake her up, but she wouldn't stop.
Clara's heart hammered in her chest. Her nightgown was soaked with sweat. She could still feel their hands on her, still hear their laughter.
I'm sorry,
she gasped.
I'm so sorry, baby. I didn't mean to scare you.
Rose ran to the bed and threw herself into Clara's arms. Clara held her tight, stroking her hair, trying to stop her own trembling.
It's okay, Mama. You're okay. The bad men aren't here. That's right, baby. They're not here. We're safe.
But over Rose's head, her eyes met Caleb's. They both knew the truth. They weren't safe. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. After Rose had finally fallen back asleep, Clara found Caleb on the porch, staring out at the darkness.
I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to wake the whole house.
Don't apologize for things you can't control. He shifted over, making room for her on the bench.
The dreams are part of healing. They'll fade eventually. How eventually?
Took me about 2 years before I could sleep through the night. He paused. Still get them sometimes, when the memories are particularly strong. Clara sat beside him, pulling her shawl tighter against the night chill.
I keep seeing their faces, she said.
The men who hurt me. I can't stop seeing them. You will. Eventually other memories will crowd them out. Memories of better things. What kind of better things? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Rose's laugh when she finally reads a whole page by herself. The way the sun looks rising over the hills. The taste of good coffee on a cold morning. He turned to look at her. You'll make new memories, Clara. Good ones. And they'll push the bad ones into the corners where they belong. Promise? Promise. They sat in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead.
Caleb?
Yeah?
Thank you.
For being here. For being you. He didn't answer, just reached over and took her hand. And Clara, who hadn't let any man touch her since the attack, didn't pull away. They sat like that until dawn broke over the hills. The morning Caleb rode into Cedar Ridge to buy supplies, marked the beginning of something neither of them had anticipated. He'd put off the trip as long as possible, reluctant to leave Clara and Rose alone even for a few hours. But they were running low on flour, sugar, and medicine, and the winter would be harsh if they weren't prepared. "We'll be fine," Clara assured him as he saddled Constance. "It's only a few hours. Rose and I will stay close to the house." Caleb checked the revolver at his hip for the third time. "There's a rifle above the door and another in the bedroom closet. You remember how to load them?" "You've shown me 6 times this week. I remember." "And if anyone comes, anyone you don't know, take Rose and hide in the root cellar. Don't try to be brave." Clara placed her hand on his arm. "Caleb, we'll be fine. You can't protect us every second of every day. At some point, you have to trust that we can take care of ourselves." He looked down at her hand on his arm. She'd been touching him more lately. Small gestures of trust that meant more than she probably realized. "I'll be back before dark," he promised. Rose came running from the barn, the tabby cat she'd named Whiskers trailing behind her. "Uncle Caleb, can you bring me some peppermint sticks? Papa used to get them for me sometimes." Something twisted in Caleb's chest. "I'll see what I can do, little bit." He rode out with the sun warming his back, trying to shake the unease that had settled in his gut. It was just a supply run. A few hours at most. Nothing was going to happen. But the feeling wouldn't leave him. Cedar Ridge was busier than usual when he arrived. Farmers from the surrounding ranches had come in for supplies before the weather turned. Caleb tied Constance outside the general store and pushed through the door, nodding to folks he recognized, but not stopping to chat. He was gathering flour and sugar when he saw it. The wanted poster hung on the wall behind the counter, newer than the others, the ink still sharp. A sketch of a man's face stared back at him. Lean features, cold eyes, a scar running down one cheek. "Silas Blackwood," the poster read. "Wanted for murder, robbery, and assault. $5,000 reward for information leading to capture." Caleb's blood ran cold. Ugly son of a bitch, ain't he? Caleb turned to find the shopkeeper, old Hank Morrison, watching him with casual interest. "Who is he?" "Blackwood? Meanest outlaw this side of the Rio Grande. Him and his gang been terrorizing folks for near on a year now. Robberies, killings, worse." Hank lowered his voice. "They say he don't leave witnesses. Anyone sees his face, they don't live to talk about it." "He been seen around here?" "Not in Cedar Ridge, thank the Lord. But he hit a homestead about 30 miles north last month. Killed the whole family. Father, mother, 2 young boys." Hank shook his head. "Sheriff Wheeler's been trying to track him down, but Blackwood's smart. Moves around, never stays in one place too long." Caleb stared at the poster, memorizing every detail of the face that had haunted Clara's nightmares. "Anything else you need?" Hank asked. "Just these supplies, and some peppermint sticks." He was paying for his goods when the door opened and 2 men walked in. Caleb didn't recognize them. Strangers weren't uncommon in Cedar Ridge, but something about these 2 made his instincts flare. They were dressed like drifters. Worn clothes, dusty boots, guns riding low on their hips. One of them, a younger man with a scraggly beard, glanced at the wanted poster and smirked. "Look at that, Jeb. They raised the bounty on old Silas." The other man, older and meaner looking, elbowed him sharply. "Shut your mouth." Caleb kept his expression neutral, but his heart was hammering. These men knew Blackwood, maybe more than knew him. He gathered his supplies and headed for the door, keeping his movements casual. But as he passed the 2 men, the younger one spoke again. "Say, friend, you live around here?" Caleb paused. "South of town a ways. Nice country down there. Quiet." The young man's eyes were too sharp, too interested.
You live alone? Just me and my horses. Funny. We heard tell there was a woman and child come through this area a few weeks back. Walking, not riding. Woman was hurt pretty bad. Caleb's grip tightened on his supplies. Haven't seen anyone like that. You sure? Pretty woman, dark hair. Little blonde girl, maybe 7 years old? I said I haven't seen them. The older man, Jeb, stepped forward. Thing is, friend, we're looking for them. They're family. Got separated during some trouble on the road. We've been real worried. Can't help you, Caleb said flatly. Now if you'll excuse me. He pushed past them and out the door, forcing himself not to run. His hands were shaking as he loaded the supplies onto Constance. Behind him, he felt their eyes, watching. He rode out of town at a normal pace, resisting the urge to kick Constance into a gallop. But once he was out of sight of the main street, he turned off the road and doubled back through the trees. Sure enough, the two men emerged from the general store a few minutes later. They mounted their horses and headed south, toward his ranch. Caleb's blood turned to ice. He knew these hills better than any outsider. There was a shortcut through Miller's Canyon that would get him home ahead of them. He rode like the devil himself was chasing him. Clara was hanging laundry when she heard the hoofbeats. Her hand went immediately to the revolver at her hip, the one Caleb insisted she wear at all times now. She scanned the horizon, heart pounding. A single rider, coming fast. For a terrible moment, she thought it was one of them, one of Blackwood's men come to finish what they'd started. Then she recognized Constance's distinctive gait, and relief flooded through her. But the relief died when she saw Caleb's face. He dismounted before Constance had fully stopped, grabbing Clara's arm and pulling her toward the house. "Where's Rose?" "Inside, napping." "Caleb, what?" "Get her, now. We need to go." "Go where? What happened?" "They're coming." His eyes were wild in a way she'd never seen. Two of Blackwood's men. They were in town asking about a woman and child. They're headed this way right now. Clara's knees buckled. Caleb caught her, held her upright. "Clara, listen to me. We don't have time to panic. Get Rose and whatever you can carry. My friend Sam Hawkins has a place about 10 miles west. We can hide there while I figure out what to do." "How did they find us?" "I don't know. Doesn't matter right now. What matters is getting you and Rose somewhere safe." Clara ran into the house on legs that felt like water. Rose was still sleeping, clutching her wooden doll. Clara scooped her up, ignoring the sharp protest from her still healing ribs. "Mama?" Rose blinked awake. "What's happening?" "We're going on a trip, baby, right now. I need you to be brave for me." Rose's eyes went wide with understanding. "Are the bad men coming?" Clara's heart shattered. Her 7-year-old daughter shouldn't know to ask that question. "Uncle Caleb is going to keep us safe, but we need to go quickly. Can you do that for me?" Rose nodded, suddenly solemn. "I can be brave." Caleb had already saddled a second horse, a gentle mare named Rosie that Rose had been learning to ride. He lifted Rose onto the saddle and turned to Clara. "Can you ride?" "I'll manage." "Take Rose and head west. Follow the creek until you hit a fork, then go left. Sam's place is about an hour's ride. Tell him I sent you. Tell him everything." Clara grabbed his arm. "What do you mean? You're coming with us." "Someone needs to lead them away from your trail. I'll circle back. Make sure they follow me instead of you." "No." Clara's voice cracked. "Caleb, no, you can't." "I have to." He gripped her shoulders. "Clara, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Tears streamed down her face. "I can't lose you too. I can't." "You won't." He pulled her close, holding her tight for just a moment.
I promise you, Clara. I'll come back to you. Both of you.
Don't make promises you can't keep.
I don't. He released her and helped her onto the horse. Now go. Fast as you can.
Uncle Caleb?
Rose's voice was small and scared.
You're coming, right? You're not leaving us.
Caleb reached up and squeezed her hand. I'm coming, little bit. I just got to do something first. You take care of your mama for me, okay?
Okay.
Rose's chin trembled.
I love you, Uncle Caleb.
Something broke open in Caleb's chest. I love you too, Rose. Both of you. Now go. Clara kicked the horse into motion, Rose clinging to her waist. She didn't look back. She couldn't. If she looked back, she'd never leave. Sam Hawkins was a tall man with kind eyes and hands scarred from years of hard work. His wife Hannah was already putting water on to boil by the time Clara finished explaining what had happened. You're safe here, Sam said firmly. This place is built like a fortress. Anyone comes looking for trouble, they'll find it.
Caleb said he was going to lead them away. That was hours ago.
Clara paced the small kitchen, unable to sit still.
He should be here by now.
Caleb knows these hills better than anyone. He'll be fine.
You don't know that. You don't know what these men are capable of.
Hannah pressed a cup of tea into Clara's hands.
Sit down before you collapse. You're still healing, and panicking won't help anyone.
Clara sank into a chair, the tea warming her trembling hands. Rose had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from fear and the hard ride.
Tell me about Caleb,
Clara said quietly.
How long have you known him?
Sam leaned against the fireplace. Since the war. We served together, watched each other's backs through some of the worst fighting you can imagine. He saved my life more times than I can count.
What was he like before Elizabeth?
Different. Lighter. He smiled more, laughed more. Had this way of seeing the good in everything, even in the middle of all that death and destruction. Sam's expression softened. When he met Elizabeth, it was like watching a man come home. She brought out the best in him.
And when she died?
I thought we'd lost him too. He just shut down. Stopped coming to town. Stopped talking to people. I'd ride out to check on him sometimes, and it was like talking to a ghost. Sam met Clara's eyes. Then you showed up. And for the first time in 5 years, I saw the man I used to know starting to come back. Clara's throat tightened.
He's done so much for us, risked everything.
And now he's out there alone.
He's not alone. Caleb Thornton is one of the most capable men I've ever known. If anyone can handle this, it's him. The sound of hoofbeats made them all freeze. Sam grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. Clara's hand went to her revolver. It's him, Sam said, relief flooding his voice. It's Caleb. Clara was out the door before anyone could stop her. Caleb was dismounting, and even in the darkness, she could see the exhaustion etched into his face.
Are you hurt?
She grabbed his arms, searching for wounds.
Caleb, are you?
I'm fine. He pulled her close, holding her tight. I lost them in the canyons north of here. They won't find this place tonight.
But they'll keep looking.
Yes. He pulled back to look at her. Clara, I need to tell you something. While I was leading them away, I circled back to the ranch. They'd already been there. Gone through the house, the barn. They found Rose's dress, the one I mended for her.
They know you were there. Clara's legs gave out. Caleb caught her, held her upright.
They know,
she whispered.
They know we survived.
They know, and they'll keep hunting until they find you.
Then we run. We take Rose and we disappear.
Running won't work. They'll follow. Men like Blackwood, They don't stop. Not ever. Caleb's jaw tightened. There's only one way this ends, Clara. We have to stop them.
How? There's 5 of them, killers, and we're
not alone. Caleb looked toward the house, where Sam stood in the doorway. We have friends, and we have something they don't.
What's that?
Something worth fighting for. The next morning, Caleb rode into Cedar Ridge to talk to Sheriff Wheeler. Clara wanted to go with him, but he insisted she stay at Sam's with Rose. If something goes wrong, you need to be able to run, and Rose needs her mother. Sheriff Wheeler was a grizzled man in his 50s, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much. He listened to Caleb's story without interruption, his expression growing darker with each word. You're telling me Silas Blackwood attacked this woman and killed her husband? And now he's hunting her because she can identify him? That's exactly what I'm telling you. And you want me to do what, exactly? Form a posse. Go after him before he comes after her. Wheeler leaned back in his chair. Blackwood's been a thorn in my side for months. But he's smart, Thornton. Every time we get close, he disappears. Has friends who warn him when law's coming. Then we don't give him time to run. We find his camp and hit him hard before he knows we're coming. And how do you propose we find his camp? Caleb pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, a rough map he'd drawn during his pursuit the day before. I tracked his men yesterday. They're holed up in Devil's Canyon, about a day's ride from here. It's defensible, but it's also a trap. Only 2 ways in or out. Wheeler studied the map. How many men? 5 that I know of, maybe more. I can put together a posse, but it'll take time. 3 days, maybe 4. We don't have 3 days. Those men are looking for Clara right now. Every hour we wait is an hour they get closer. Wheeler rubbed his jaw. What do you suggest? Let me scout ahead, me and Sam Hawkins. We find their exact position, come back with intelligence. Then you bring the posse, and we take them down. That's dangerous work, Thornton. Blackwood catches you scouting, he'll kill you slow. He'll try. Caleb stood. I'm not asking for permission, Sheriff. I'm asking for backup. Those men hurt someone I care about. They killed her husband, and they're hunting her daughter. I'm going to stop them, with or without you. Wheeler was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. 3 days. I'll have 12 men ready to ride. You find that camp and get back here alive. We'll finish this together. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wheeler stood and shook his hand. Just don't get yourself killed before we can put Blackwood in the ground. That night, Caleb returned to Sam's place to find Clara waiting on the porch. She stood when she saw him, relief and fear warring in her expression. What did the sheriff say? He's forming a posse. 3 days. And until then? Caleb took her hands in his. Tomorrow, Sam and I ride to Devil's Canyon. We scout Blackwood's position, then come back to guide the posse. Clara's face went pale. You're going after them? Just to find them. We won't engage unless we have to. And if you have to? Caleb was silent. Promise me, Clara said, her voice breaking. Promise me you won't do anything stupid. Promise me you'll come back. Clara, I need to hear you say it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I've lost one man I loved to violence. I can't lose another. Caleb froze. What did you say? Clara seemed to realize what she'd admitted. She tried to pull away, but Caleb held her hands tight. Clara, look at me. She raised her eyes to his. Did you mean that? She swallowed hard. I don't know. I'm not ready for this, Caleb. It's too soon, too complicated. But when I think about you riding off tomorrow, when I think about never seeing you again... Hey, he cupped her face in his hands. I'm coming back. You hear me? I've got too much to live for now to die in some canyon. You can't promise that. No,
but I can promise I'll fight like hell to keep it." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you, Clara. I've loved you since the night you collapsed on my porch. Maybe before that even. Maybe I've been waiting my whole life for you to knock on my door." Clara let out a sob that was half laugh, half cry. "Your timing is terrible." "Always has been." She kissed him then, not a gentle, hesitant kiss, but something fierce and desperate, full of everything they hadn't been able to say. Caleb kissed her back, pouring 5 years of loneliness and grief and hope into a single moment. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Come back to me," Clara whispered. "Whatever happens out there, you come back." "I will." He kissed her forehead. "I promise." Before dawn the next morning, Caleb and Sam rode out toward Devil's Canyon. Clara stood on the porch and watched them disappear into the gray light. Rose's hand clutched in hers. "Is Uncle Caleb going to fight the bad men?" Rose asked. "He's going to keep us safe." "He always keeps us safe." Rose looked up at her mother. "That's because he loves us, right?" Clara's heart clenched. "Yes, baby. That's because he loves us." "I love him too." Rose squeezed her mother's hand. "He's our family now, right, Mama?" Clara watched the horizon where Caleb had vanished, praying to God she'd see him again. "Right, baby. He's our family." The ride to Devil's Canyon took most of the day. Caleb and Sam moved carefully, staying off the main trails, using creek beds and tree lines for cover. Neither man spoke much. They'd ridden together in worse conditions during the war, and some things didn't need words. By late afternoon, they'd reached the outskirts of the canyon country. The land grew rougher here, cut through with ravines and dead ends that could hide an army. "Perfect outlaw territory," Sam muttered, scanning the rocks above them. "Easy to defend, hard to approach. Which is why we go slow." Caleb pointed toward a thin column of smoke rising from somewhere deep in the canyon. There. They left their horses hidden in a grove of cottonwoods and proceeded on foot. The sun beat down mercilessly, but Caleb barely noticed. His entire focus was on that smoke and what it meant. It took 2 hours of careful climbing to get close enough to see the camp. 5 horses in a makeshift corral. 4 men lounging around a fire. A 5th standing watch at the canyon entrance with a rifle across his knees. Caleb's blood went cold when he recognized Silas Blackwood from the wanted poster. Tall and lean, with that distinctive scar running down his cheek. Even from this distance, Caleb could feel the cruelty radiating from him. "That's them," he breathed. "I count 5, Sam whispered back. "We could take them, wait until dark, pick them off one by one." "Too risky. We go back, get the sheriff, do this right." But as Caleb started to move, something caught his eye. The youngest of Blackwood's men, barely more than a boy, wore something around his neck. A piece of fabric, blue and white, tied like a bandana. Caleb's stomach dropped. Rose's dress, the one Clara had mended, the one they'd left hanging to dry the morning they fled. "They've been to my ranch," he said, his voice barely controlled. "They know." Sam grabbed his arm. "All the more reason to get back." "If they know about your place, they might know about mine. Hannah and the others could be in danger." The words hit Caleb like a bucket of cold water. Sam was right. They'd left Clara and Rose at the Hawkins place, thinking it was safe. But if Blackwood had tracked them to Caleb's ranch, he could track them anywhere. "We need to go. Now!" They scrambled back down the canyon as fast as stealth would allow. Every second felt like an eternity. Every shadow might hide one of Blackwood's scouts. They reached the horses and rode hard, pushing the animals to their limits. The sun was setting when they crested the last hill overlooking Sam's homestead.
and saw the smoke. Not cooking smoke. Thick black columns billowing from the barn. "No," Sam breathed. "Hannah." They kicked their horses into a gallop. As they got closer, the scene became clearer. The barn was fully engulfed in flames. In the yard, Hannah stood with her hands raised, while a man held a gun to her head.
Caleb's world narrowed to a single point of terrible focus. "I knew you'd come running back," the man shouted, his voice carrying across the distance. "Blackwood said you would. Said men like you can't help being predictable." Sam made a sound like a wounded animal and started forward, but Caleb grabbed his reins. "Wait. If we charge in blind, she dies." "That's my wife." "I know, which is exactly why we can't lose our heads." Caleb scanned the yard, counting threats. 3 men visible, 1 holding Hannah, 2 near the burning barn. But where were the other 2? Where was Blackwood himself? And where were Clara and Rose? The man holding Hannah answered his unspoken question. "Looking for someone?" he called. "The pretty widow and her brat are in the house. Blackwood's keeping them company. Says he's got unfinished business with the woman." Rage flooded through Caleb, white-hot and blinding. But underneath ran a current of ice-cold calculation. Blackwood wanted him angry, wanted him to do something stupid. "We go around," Caleb said quietly. "You take the left through those trees. I'll take the right through the creek bed. When you're in position, fire a shot in the air. I'll use the distraction to get into the house through the back." "What about Hannah?" "The second that gun comes off her head, you drop the man holding her. Can you make that shot?" Sam's hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "I can make it." "Then we move. Now." They separated, Caleb moving fast through the creek bed that ran behind the house. His heart hammered so loud he was sure someone would hear it. He'd almost reached the back of the house when he heard Clara scream. The sound ripped through him like a knife. All his careful planning evaporated. He broke from cover and sprinted toward the house, throwing himself through the half-open back window without hesitation. He landed hard on the floor of what had been a storage room. The house was dark, except for lamplight spilling from the main room. He could hear voices, Blackwood's smooth and mocking, Clara's ragged with terror, and underneath it all, a child crying. Caleb moved silently down the hall, revolver drawn and cocked. When he reached the doorway, what he saw nearly drove him to his knees. Clara was on the floor, her dress torn at the shoulder. Blackwood stood over her with his gun pointed at her head. In the corner, Rose sat tied to a chair, tears streaming down her face, a gag in her mouth. Another man, younger, the one wearing Rose's dress as a bandana, stood by the door, keeping watch. "I told you we should have made sure you were dead the first time," Blackwood was saying, his tone conversational, almost bored. "Would have saved us all this trouble. But you know how it is. Sometimes you get distracted, think you've done enough damage, and the job gets left half-finished." He nudged Clara with his boot. "Lucky for me, I get a second chance to do things right." "Please." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "My daughter. Whatever you do to me, please let her go. She's 7 years old." 7 years old and already a witness. Blackwood gestured lazily toward Rose. "Can't have her growing up and pointing fingers. That's not how Silas Blackwood operates." "She won't say anything. I swear she won't." Now. We both know that's a lie." Blackwood crouched down, bringing his face close to Clara's. "You know what I think? I think you've been hiding out here, building yourself a nice little life, hoping I'd forget about you. But I don't forget, Clara. Not ever." He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Your husband died too quick. Didn't get to enjoy it properly. But you,
He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Caleb had ever seen. "We've got all night." Caleb stepped into the room. "Step away from her." Blackwood spun, his gun swinging toward Caleb, but he wasn't fast enough. Caleb fired, the bullet catching Blackwood in the shoulder and spinning him around. The outlaw's gun clattered to the floor. The young man by the door reached for his weapon, but a rifle shot from outside shattered the window beside him. He dropped, clutching his arm. Through the broken window, Caleb could see Sam running toward the house. Hannah was free, stumbling toward safety. Blackwood staggered against the wall, blood spreading across his shirt. But his eyes remained sharp, calculating. "Well, well," he said, his voice strained but mocking. "The hero arrives. Little late, though, wouldn't you say?" "Shut up." "Already had my hands on her, already felt her shaking, heard her begging." Blackwood laughed, a wet, bubbling sound. "That's going to stay with her forever, you know. Every time you touch her, she'll remember me touching her first." Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. It would be so easy.
One shot. End this monster forever. "Do it," Blackwood taunted. "Go ahead. Show your little family what kind of man you really are. Show them you're no different from me."
"He's nothing like you." Clara had pulled herself to her feet. She was swaying, pale, but her voice was strong. "You're a monster. He's the man who saved us when the world had already thrown us away." Blackwood spat blood on the floor. "Saved you? All he did was delay the inevitable. You think you're safe now? I got men who'll hunt you forever. There's always another one coming." "Had men," Sam said, stepping through the door with his rifle trained on Blackwood. "The ones outside are dead, or wishing they were. Sheriff's on his way too. Someone in town saw the smoke." Blackwood's expression flickered. For the first time, something like uncertainty crossed his face. "An hour," he said. "That's a long time. Long enough for me to bleed out, sure. But that's fine. I made my point." His eyes found Clara.
She knows now. She'll spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. I said, shut up. Caleb moved toward Rose, pulling the gag from her mouth, working at the ropes binding her wrists. The little girl threw her arms around his neck the moment she was free. "Uncle Caleb," she sobbed. "I knew you'd come. I knew it." "I'm here, little bit. You're safe now." "They hurt Mama. They were gonna—" "I know, but it's over. Nobody's hurting anyone anymore." Behind him, Blackwood kept talking. Couldn't help himself. "She was sweet, you know. Fought hard, which made it better. Her husband died watching. Did she tell you that? Watching while we—" The gunshot was impossibly loud. Blackwood jerked once, then slid down the wall. A neat hole in the center of his forehead. Clara stood with Hannah's small derringer smoking in her shaking hands. "He wouldn't stop talking," she said, her voice distant, hollow. "He just wouldn't stop." The gun fell from her fingers. Caleb caught her before she hit the floor, gathering her against his chest while she finally broke. Great tearing sobs shook her body. 5 weeks of fear and pain and healing, all of it pouring out at once. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "You're safe, both of you. It's over." "I killed him." Clara's voice was muffled against his chest. "I killed a man." "You killed a monster. There's a difference." "Is there?" Caleb pulled back enough to look at her face. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her eyes were wild, searching. "He was going to keep hurting people," Caleb said quietly. "He was going to kill Rose, kill you, kill anyone who got in his way. What you did wasn't murder, Clara. It was protection. It was love." "I'm glad he's dead." Her voice cracked. "That's what scares me. I'm glad I did it."
What does that make me?
Human. It makes you human. Rose wiggled between them, wrapping her small arms around both of their waists.
Mama's brave, she said firmly. The bad man was saying mean things, and she made him stop. That's not wrong. That's what mamas do.
Clara let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. She pulled Rose close, pressing kisses to her daughter's hair.
When did you get so smart?
Uncle Caleb's been teaching me.
Over Rose's head, Caleb met Clara's eyes. Something passed between them. Gratitude. Relief. Love. "Let's get you both out of here," he said gently, "before the sheriff arrives and we have to explain all this." Sam helped Hannah to the porch. She was shaken but unharmed. The man who'd held the gun to her head lay unconscious in the yard, courtesy of Sam's rifle butt.
I'm sorry, Clara said to Hannah. This is our fault. They came here because of us.
Hannah shook her head firmly. "They came here because they're evil men. That's not your fault. That's not anyone's fault but theirs."
But your barn
"Can be rebuilt." Hannah took Clara's hands in hers. "You can't.
Rose can't. A barn is just wood and nails. Your family."
Clara's tears started fresh. The sheriff arrived an hour later with 6 armed men. He took statements, examined the bodies, and by the time the sun rose, had pieced together enough to understand what had happened. "Silas Blackwood," Sheriff Wheeler said, standing over the outlaw's corpse, "took down by a school teacher with a pocket pistol. The papers are going to have a field day with that." "It was self-defense," Caleb said sharply. "He was threatening her, bragging about what he'd done." "Easy, Thornton. I'm not saying otherwise." Wheeler spat tobacco juice in the dirt. "Far as I'm concerned, she did the territory a favor. There'll be paperwork, but nothing that should cause trouble." He looked at Clara, who sat on the porch steps with Rose asleep in her lap. "You're a brave woman, Mrs. Morgan. Most folks would have fallen apart facing what you faced." "I had help." Clara's eyes found Caleb.
I had someone worth fighting for.
After the sheriff left and the bodies were taken away, after the wounded outlaws were loaded into a wagon for transport to jail, Caleb found Clara standing alone by the burned remains of Sam's barn. "You should be resting," he said.
"Can't sleep." She turned to face him. "Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. The moment the bullet hit. The way his eyes went empty."
"That'll fade, eventually."
"Will it?"
Caleb took her hands in his. "Clara, you saved Rose's life tonight. You saved all our lives. Don't let guilt take that away from you."
"I'm not feeling guilt, exactly. That's what bothers me." She met his eyes. "I'm feeling relief, satisfaction, maybe even pride. Is that wrong?"
"It's honest." He squeezed her hands. "You're allowed to be glad your tormentor is gone. You're allowed to feel safe. That's not wrong. That's just human." Clara stepped closer, resting her head against his chest.
Caleb wrapped his arms around her, holding her while the first gray light of dawn crept over the hills.
"What happens now?"
she asked quietly. "Now we rest. We heal. We figure out what comes next."
"And what do you want to come next?"
Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "I want you to come home with me," he said finally. "You and Rose. Not because you need protection anymore, but because I want you there. Because that house hasn't felt like home since Elizabeth died. Not until you filled it, with reading lessons and laughter and the smell of chicken and dumplings." Clara let out a shaky breath.
"Caleb."
"I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. I'm just asking you to stay. To let me love you. To let us be a family."
"I'm still broken. What they did to me."
"Then we'll be broken together." He pulled back to look at her face.
I've got cracks too, Clara. Places that never healed right after Elizabeth. But somehow, being with you and Rose, those cracks don't hurt as much.
Maybe that's what love is. Two broken people helping each other hold the pieces together. Clara reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines around his eyes.
You're a good man, Caleb Thornton. I'm a man who loves you, that's all. She rose on her toes and kissed him, soft, gentle, full of promise. Take us home, she whispered against his lips. Take us home. 3 days later, Clara and Rose moved back to the Thornton Ranch. The house looked different somehow. Or maybe Clara was seeing it with different eyes. The main room that had seemed sparse and lonely now felt cozy, full of potential. The bedroom where she'd recovered from her injuries now felt like sanctuary instead of sick room. Rose ran from room to room, checking that everything was exactly as they'd left it. Whiskers is still here, she shouted from the barn. And all the chickens, even Queen Victoria. Caleb watched her go, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth.
That child has more energy than both of us combined.
She's happy. Clara slipped her hand into his. Really happy. Maybe for the first time since Thomas died. What about you? Caleb turned to face her. Are you happy? Clara considered the question. A month ago, she thought she'd never feel anything but fear and grief again. Now, standing in this house with this man, watching her daughter laugh in the sunshine, she felt something she'd almost forgotten was possible. I'm getting there, she said honestly. The shadows aren't gone. Maybe they never will be completely. But they're smaller now. Less suffocating. That's enough for now. Is it? Enough for you, I mean? Caleb raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. Clara Morgan, you could give me nothing but your presence for the rest of my life, and it would be more than I ever expected to have again. His eyes held hers. Whatever you can give, whenever you can give it, that's enough.
It'll always be enough. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Not sad tears, something else entirely.
I love you, she said. The words came out easier than she expected. I think I've loved you since you carried me into your house that first night. I was just too scared to admit it. Caleb's breath caught. Say it again. I love you, Caleb Thornton. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and Clara felt the last of her walls crumble away. She was home. The weeks that followed Blackwood's death passed in a gentle rhythm that Clara had almost forgotten existed. She woke each morning to the sound of Rose's laughter mixing with Caleb's deep voice outside. She fell asleep each night knowing they were safe, truly safe, for the first time since Thomas died. The nightmares still came sometimes, but they were fewer now, and when they woke her gasping, Caleb was there to hold her until the shaking stopped. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing the ranch in white silence. Clara discovered she loved Texas winters, loved watching Rose build snowmen with Caleb, loved sitting by the fire while he read aloud from Elizabeth's books, his voice stumbling less now over the difficult words. You're getting better, Clara said one evening, listening to him work through a passage of poetry. I've got a good teacher. Caleb looked up from the book, firelight dancing in his brown eyes. She's patient, kind, beautiful too, though I try not to let that distract me. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. Flatterer. Truth-teller. He set the book aside and reached for her hand. Come here. She moved to sit beside him, letting him pull her close. These moments of intimacy had grown more frequent, more natural. The first time he tried to hold her after Blackwood's death, she'd flinched. Old fear, old memories. But Caleb had simply stepped back, given her space, waited for her to come to him when she was ready. She was ready now.
I've been thinking, Caleb said, his voice rumbling against her ear. dangerous habit. About us. About what comes next. Clara's heart stuttered.
What do you mean?
I mean, I've been carrying something around for weeks, trying to find the right moment. He shifted, reaching into his pocket. I don't know if this is it, but I can't wait any longer. He opened his hand to reveal a simple silver ring, delicate and beautiful. Elizabeth's mother gave this to her on her wedding day, Caleb said quietly. She wanted our daughter to have it someday, if we ever had one. But we didn't, and it's been sitting in a box for 5 years, and I think— He took a shaky breath. I think Elizabeth would want it to have a purpose again. Clara stared at the ring, tears blurring her vision.
Caleb,
I'm not asking you to forget Thomas. I'm not asking you to pretend the past didn't happen. I'm just asking if you'll let me be your future. He took her left hand in his. Clara Morgan, will you marry me? The question hung in the air between them. Clara thought about Thomas, about the life they'd planned, about the dreams that had died with him on that dusty road. She thought about Blackwood, about the violence and terror, about the woman she'd been forced to become to survive. And she thought about Caleb, patient, steady Caleb, who'd opened his door to strangers and given them everything without asking for anything in return.
yes,
She whispered.
yes, I'll marry you.
Caleb's face broke into a smile so bright it could have lit up the darkest night. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as though it had been waiting for her all along. I love you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I've loved you since the moment you collapsed on my porch. Maybe before that. Maybe I've been waiting my whole life for you to knock on my door. Clara kissed him then, pouring everything she couldn't say into the gesture. Gratitude, hope, love. When they finally broke apart, both were crying. We're quite a pair, Clara said, laughing through her tears. 2 broken people trying to build a whole life. I think we're going to be just fine. A small voice came from the doorway.
Mama? Uncle Caleb? Why are you crying?
Rose stood there in her nightgown, clutching her wooden doll, her face creased with worry. Caleb opened his arm, beckoning her over. Come here, little bit. Rose climbed onto the settee, settling between them. We're not sad, Clara assured her. These are happy tears.
Happy tears? That doesn't make sense.
Sometimes, when people are very, very happy, they cry. It's a grown-up thing. Rose considered this. Are you happy because you're going to get married? Clara and Caleb exchanged surprised looks. How did you know about that? Caleb asked. I saw you practicing in the barn. With the ring. Rose grinned, clearly pleased with herself. You kept dropping it and saying bad words. Caleb's face flushed. I was nervous. Why? Mama loves you. Anyone can see that. Clara pulled her daughter close. You're too smart for your own good, you know that? That's what Uncle Caleb says too. Rose looked up at him with serious eyes.
Does this mean you're going to be my papa now? For real?
Caleb's expression softened. If you want me to be.
I want that.
Rose threw her arms around his neck.
I've wanted that for a long time. I just didn't know if I was allowed to ask.
You're always allowed to ask me anything, little bit. Always. Clara watched them embrace, her heart so full it hurt. This man who'd lost his own chance at fatherhood, who'd spent 5 years alone with his grief, was holding her daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world. Because to him, she was. They were married on a warm April morning, when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom and the air smelled like new beginnings. Sam and Hannah Hawkins stood as witnesses. Sheriff Wheeler came out to offer his congratulations. Even old Doc Webb made the trip, pronouncing Clara fully healed and fit for matrimony. The ceremony was simple, held in the yard under an arch that Sam had helped Caleb build. Hannah decorated it with the first wildflowers of spring, and Rose insisted on helping scatter petals down the makeshift aisle. Clara wore a dress Hannah had helped her sew, cream-colored linen with delicate lace at the collar. Caleb wore his best suit, the one he'd bought for Elizabeth's funeral and never worn since. "We're using sad clothes for happy things," he'd said when Clara asked about it. Seems fitting somehow. The preacher from Cedar Ridge performed the ceremony. He was a kind man with gentle eyes, who spoke of second chances and the resilience of love. "Do you, Caleb Thornton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" "I do." Caleb's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. "And do you, Clara Morgan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" Clara thought about all the roads that had led her here. Boston, the wagon west, Thomas's death, the terrible night that had broken her, the knock on a stranger's door. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The preacher smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Caleb cupped her face in his hands, and the kiss was sweet and full of promise. Rose cheered. Hannah cried. Sam clapped Caleb on the back hard enough to make him stumble.
Does this mean you're really my papa now?
Rose asked, tugging at Caleb's sleeve. Caleb knelt to her level. "If you'll have me."
I'll have you.
Rose hugged him tight.
I'll have you forever and ever.
That night, after the guests had gone, and Rose had been tucked into bed, exhausted from excitement, Clara and Caleb sat on the porch, watching the stars.
Mrs. Thornton,
Caleb said, testing the name.
Mr. Thornton,
Clara replied, smiling.
Has a nice ring to it.
It does. He took her hand, running his thumb over the wedding band that now sat alongside Elizabeth's ring.
I never thought I'd feel this way again, he said quietly. After Elizabeth died, I was sure that part of me was gone forever. The part that could love, that could hope, that could imagine a future. And now? Now I can't imagine a future without you in it.
He turned to face her.
You and Rose, you're my whole world.
Everything I do, everything I am, it's all for you. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder.
I feel the same way. When Thomas died, I thought my life was over. I was just going through the motions, surviving for Rose's sake. But surviving isn't living.
No, it's not.
You taught me that. You taught me that it was okay to hope again, to love again, that healing doesn't mean forgetting.
We carry them with us, Caleb said. Thomas and Elizabeth. They're part of our story, even if they're not here to see how it ends.
Do you think they'd approve? Of us, I mean?
Caleb was quiet for a long moment. I think Elizabeth would say I finally stopped moping and did something useful with my life. And I think Thomas would be glad you found someone to take care of you and Rose. Clara smiled.
Thomas would probably threaten to haunt you if you ever hurt me.
Then it's a good thing I don't plan on hurting you. Ever.
Promise?
Promise. The first year of their marriage passed quickly, filled with small joys and quiet contentments. Clara planted a garden behind the house, filling it with vegetables and flowers. She taught Rose to read and write, using Elizabeth's books and ordering new ones from town. In the evenings, the three of them would sit by the fire while Clara read aloud, her voice filling the house with stories of adventure and romance.
Rose flourished. The scared, traumatized child who'd knocked on Caleb's door slowly transformed into a happy, confident girl. She learned to ride her own pony, a gentle mare Caleb bought her for her 8th birthday. She helped with the chickens and the garden. She called Caleb Papa so naturally that it seemed she'd always done it. "Papa, can you teach me to rope cattle?" she asked one morning over breakfast. "You want to be a cowgirl now?" "I want to be like you, strong and brave."
Caleb's eyes glistened. "You're already strong and brave, little bit. But yeah, I can teach you to rope." Clara watched them head out to the corral together, her heart swelling with love. This was her life now. This man, this child, this home. It was more than she'd ever dared to hope for. Summer brought news that made Clara cry with joy.
"You're certain?"
she asked Doc Webb, hands pressed to her stomach. "As certain as I can be. You're about 3 months along, I'd say. Baby should come around Christmas." Clara floated home on a cloud. She found Caleb in the barn, mending a bridle, and threw her arms around him before he could speak. "What's this about?" he asked, laughing.
"I'm pregnant."
The words hung in the air. Caleb went absolutely still.
We're going to have a baby, yes."
Clara pulled back to see his face.
"Are you happy?"
Caleb's answer was to sweep her off her feet and spin her around, whooping with joy. "Happy? Clara, I don't even have words." He set her down gently, cradling her face in his hands. "A baby. Our baby. Our baby." He kissed her, long and deep, and when they broke apart, both were crying. "Does Rose know?" he asked.
"Not yet. I wanted to tell you first."
"Let's tell her together." They found Rose in her room, playing with her dolls. She looked up when they entered, immediately sensing something different.
"What's wrong? Why are you both crying again?"
"Happy tears," Clara said, sitting on the edge of the bed.
"We have something to tell you."
"What?" Caleb knelt beside the bed. "How would you feel about being a big sister?" Rose's eyes went wide.
"A sister? Or a brother?"
"We don't know yet, but Mama's going to have a baby, around Christmas." Rose was silent for a long moment. Then her face broke into the biggest smile they'd ever seen.
"I'm going to be a big sister," she breathed. "A real big sister."
"Is that okay with you?" Clara asked.
"Okay? It's the best thing ever."
Rose threw her arms around both of them.
"I'm going to teach the baby everything.
How to read and ride and collect eggs and—" "Let's maybe wait until the baby's born before we plan its education," Caleb said, laughing. "But I can start thinking about names, right?" "You can definitely start thinking about names." The baby came on Christmas Eve, in the same bed where Elizabeth had died. But this time, the ending was different. Clara labored for hours, Doc Webb at her side. Caleb holding her hands so tight she thought he might break her fingers. Rose waited in the other room with Hannah, who'd come to help. "Push," Doc Webb instructed. "One more big push, Clara." Clara screamed and pushed, and suddenly, miraculously, there was crying. A new voice in the world. "It's a boy," Doc Webb announced, placing the squalling infant on Clara's chest. "A healthy boy." Clara looked down at her son through a blur of exhausted tears. He was perfect. Red-faced and furious, and absolutely perfect.
"Caleb," she breathed. "Look at him."
Caleb was crying openly now, making no effort to hide it. He reached out one calloused finger to touch the baby's cheek.
"Hey there, little one," he whispered. "I'm your papa."
Rose burst through the door, unable to wait any longer.
"Is it here? Can I see?"
Clara beckoned her over.
Come meet your brother."
Rose climbed onto the bed, peering at the tiny bundle with wonder.
"He's so small," she said, "and wrinkly."
"All babies are wrinkly at first," Hannah assured her. "He'll smooth out."
"What's his name?"
Clara and Caleb exchanged looks. They'd discussed this, late at night when they couldn't sleep.
"Thomas," Clara said. "Thomas Caleb Thornton, after both his papas."
Caleb's breath caught.
"Clara, you don't have to. I want to. Thomas gave me Rose. You gave me this new life. Our son should carry both your names."
Caleb pressed his forehead to hers, unable to speak.
"Thomas,"
Rose repeated, trying out the name.
"I like it. Hi, Thomas. I'm your big sister."
I'm going to take such good care of you. Looking at her family gathered around the bed, Clara felt something settle into place in her chest. A sense of completeness she'd thought she'd never feel again. 2 years later, another baby came. A girl this time, with Clara's green eyes and Caleb's dark hair. They named her Elizabeth Rose, after the women who'd loved them before. Rose took her role as big sister seriously, helping with feeding and changing and singing lullabies. Thomas toddled after her everywhere, his first word, Rosie, rather than Mama or Papa. "Should I be offended?" Caleb asked, watching his children play. "You can be offended when he stops following you around like a shadow," Clara replied. Because Thomas did follow Caleb everywhere. At 3 years old, he insisted on helping with every ranch chore, no matter how small. Caleb made him tiny tools, taught him to care for the animals, let him believe he was genuinely helping. "He's going to be a rancher someday," Caleb said proudly. "He's going to be whatever he wants to be," Clara corrected. "But yes, probably a rancher." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Caleb surprised Clara with a trip to town. He'd arranged for Sam and Hannah to watch the children, and he drove her in the wagon without explaining where they were going. "Close your eyes," he said as they neared Cedar Ridge.
"Caleb, what?"
"Just trust me." She closed her eyes, letting him guide her. When he finally said she could look, she found herself standing in front of a small building on Main Street. A sign hung above the door. Thornton School. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "What is this?" "I bought it last month. Fixed it up." Caleb took her hands. "You've been teaching our kids for years. Teaching half the neighborhood kids who come by. You've always said you missed having a real classroom." He gestured at the building. "Now you have one." Clara burst into tears.
"Happy tears," she managed. "Definitely happy tears."
"So you like it?"
"I love it. I love you." She threw her arms around him. "How did I ever get so lucky?"
"Luck had nothing to do with it," Caleb said. "You knocked on my door. That was courage, not luck. Everything after that was just two people choosing each other, over and over again." Clara pulled back to look at his face. 10 years had added more gray to his hair, more lines around his eyes. But his gaze was still steady, still warm, still filled with the love that had saved her life.
"I'd choose you again," she said. 1,000 times. 1,000,000 times. In every life, I'd find my way to your door.
And I'd always open it. That evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset, just as they'd done 1,000 times before. In the yard, Rose was teaching Thomas to catch fireflies, while baby Elizabeth clapped her hands and squealed with delight. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Caleb said.
"What?"
"That night you knocked on my door. I almost didn't answer. I was so deep in my grief, so convinced nothing good would ever happen again. I almost just sat there and let you die on my porch." Clara squeezed his hand.
"But you didn't."
"No, I didn't." He turned to look at her. "Best decision I ever made."
"Better than marrying me?"
"That was the second best decision," he grinned. "Opening the door came first." Clara laughed, leaning her head against his shoulder.
I love you, Caleb Thornton.
I love you too, Clara Thornton. Every day, every moment, for the rest of my life. They sat together as the stars emerged, watching their children play, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling into evening. The house that had once been a tomb was now filled with laughter and love. The man who'd been waiting to die was now more alive than he'd ever been.
And the woman who'd knocked on his door, bleeding and broken, carrying a child and begging for shelter in a barn, had found something she'd thought was lost forever. Home. Not a place, Clara had learned, but a feeling. The feeling of being loved completely, accepted fully, chosen deliberately. Home was Caleb's steady presence beside her. Home was Rose's laughter and Thomas's questions and Elizabeth's first steps. Home was the ranch where they'd built their life together, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. And it was worth every tear, every scar, every moment of darkness they'd walk through to find it. Some stories end with happily ever after. This one ended with something better. This one ended with a family, imperfect and beautiful, choosing to love each other again and again, through joy and sorrow, through loss and healing, through all the ordinary days that make up an extraordinary life.
Clara Morgan had once knocked on a stranger's door, asking if she and her daughter could sleep in his barn. Caleb Thornton had opened that door and found his reason to keep living. And together, they'd built something neither of them had dared to hope for. A home, a family, a love that would last forever. That was enough. That was everything. That was their story, and it was complete.